Hi, folks. It's Jamie Satterfield with KnoxNews.com. I'm outside Knox County Criminal Court, where the trial of Joel Guy Jr. has just wrapped up with closing arguments. This case has been going on since Monday. Joel Guy Jr. is 32. He's accused of killing his parents inside their Hardin Valley home during the Thanksgiving weekend of 2016, dismembering their bodies and trying to dissolve their bones so that there would be no evidence left behind. That did not happen. According to the proof, Joel Guy Jr. suffered himself slices on his hands during this knife attack on his parents, and that interrupted the plan, according to the prosecution. We've heard testimony all week. Most of it has been fairly damning for Joel Guy Jr. Prosecutors put into evidence what they're calling a book of premeditation. And it was a notebook in Joel Guy's handwriting where he detailed his plans and what he was going to do, that he was going to use knives to kill both his parents, that he was going to dismember them, he was going to try to dissolve their bones with various chemicals and liquids. And it also, this book of premeditation, as the prosecution is calling it, outlined a motive, and that was money. Today, we had closing arguments in the case. Hector Sanchez, who's a Knox County Assistant District Attorney General, he delivered the first closing argument for the state. If you don't know, the state gets to go twice in closings, and that's because they carry the burden of proof. The defendant doesn't have to prove a thing. The state has to prove everything. So they get sort of two shots at arguing their case. Hector Sanchez did the first argument, and he talked a lot about this motive. And I'm referring to my notes here. He said, the motive is pretty apparent in this case. Money. $500,000. That's what this case was about. As you know, if you've read any of my reporting, I discovered this week that Joel Guy Jr. was very familiar with the life insurance that his mother carried on him, and also the life insurance that his father had through her employer. And it was a $500,000 policy, and he is still today refusing to give up his claim to that life insurance money. I have a story about that on KnoxNews.com right now that you can take a look at. But Hector Sanchez noted that in this book of premeditation, in these notes, Joel Guy actually sort of did the math on if dad dies first, then he gets this amount. If mom dies first, he gets this amount. He wanted to maximize how much money he would receive. Hector Sanchez also noted that there was proof in the record, mainly videos from various stores in Louisiana, that show that Joel Guy Jr. started buying his killing tools and his dismemberment tools and the things he was going to use to try to dissolve these bones, various household cleaning products, Drano, things like that. That he started making those purchases 19 days before these killings. It was in early November when he started visiting several stores. And Mr. Sanchez argued that one of the reasons he went to several stores is he didn't want to call attention to himself. So the state is arguing here that not only were these killings premeditated, but they were premeditated well in advance. That Joel Guy Jr. knew that his parents were preparing to retire. They were moving out of their Knox County home, moving over to a family home in Hawkins County, and that they intended to quit paying this guy's bills. He was 28 years old at this time, had been in college since 18, never had a job. His mother, the only reason she was working was to pay his bills. And she and her husband had discussed with other family members that they were tired of that. They wanted to retire and enjoy their lives and quit supporting this guy. And the allegation is Joel Guy Jr. knew that and decided to kill them. So Hector Sanchez talked a lot about this pre-planning. And then he also notes the callous disregard He says, what does Joel Michael Guy do after he kills his parents? He went to the Walmart to attend to his own wounds. And video surveillance does show that after the guys were killed, and that's, Joel Guy Sr., 61, and Lisa Guy, 55. After they were killed, Joel Guy went to the Walmart. He's captured on video. You could see that his hand was injured, and he was buying some first aid stuff for his own hands. And then the second set of closing arguments was given by Leslie Knox. She's a veteran prosecutor. She's handled, I don't know how many murder cases. I've lost count. She's very good. But she also talked about these handwritten notes. And what she said was, we have basically what amounts to a diary that outlines a plan with the intent to kill. He's used to having Lisa Guy pay for everything, and he wasn't about to let them cut him off. He would rather see them dead than see that happen. And one of the most compelling arguments that Leslie Knox gave was to ask this jury to picture what these people went through. So she asked them to picture what Joel Guy Sr. must have been experiencing when he grabbed a hold of that knife, and we know that he tried to fend off his son because he had defensive wounds on his hands. So she said, think of that, him holding on to that knife, and he's looking at his son, and he knows his son is attacking him. She got teary, I got teary. And then she said, think about Lisa Guy. Lisa Guy has gone to the store to buy her son his favorite ice cream. And she comes in the door, and the allegation or the assumption is that he calls her upstairs, or she's alerted to go upstairs in some way. She gets to the top of the stairs, and she sees her son, this boy that she's loved, and he's standing there with a knife. And that was powerful for this jury to actually put them in the shoes of parents whose son attacked them in this manner. Now, was there a defense? Not much. There's been no mental health diagnosis in this case, no suggestion that Joel Guy Jr. was not right-minded when this occurred. And these notes that were found are clearly in his handwriting. The defense kind of played with that in closing arguments that there was no handwriting expert, but they know, and this jury knows. It's his handwriting. There's no doubt of that. But John Halstead did make a fight of it. He is a assistant public defender here in Knox County, one of 3 public defenders who are assigned to this case, and they've done good work on it. They've done the best they can. And John Halstead, he made a little hay with the fact that there was testimony from Michelle Tyler, who is one of Joel Guy's sisters, and she said that on Thanksgiving, as the family sat down for dinner, that Joel Guy Jr. was really peppy and happy and friendly and talking to her sons. And she said she was surprised by that. She didn't even think he knew her sons. Joel Guy Jr. has lived apart from his family for a very long time, since he was a kid. He went to boarding school. So she found that unusual. But John Halstead used that to the defense benefit. Said, this does not look like a guy that's getting ready to kill his parents. He's happy that day. So that's one thing that John Halstead tried to do, is to ask these jurors, was his behavior on Thanksgiving consistent with someone who's planning to kill his parents? Halstead argued no. He did say, we don't deny that this was a terrible, awful thing that happened to these people. But what he argued was that the state had not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that it was Joel Guy. And so he poked some holes in some of the forensic testing. He said, they could have done more testing. He noted that they did not do touch DNA on the actual pages of the notes. But I will say that when Leslie Nacios gave her final round of closings after Mr. Halstead spoke, she addressed that. She noted that they did find his DNA on the cover of the notebook, which was the only surface that really you could test for touch DNA. And she also noted that this friendly, happy, outgoing attitude that he put on at Thanksgiving, and I'm looking at my notes here, she said it was an act, a show. And if you think about it, her argument is He already had his murder plan in his backpack in the bedroom. He'd already bought all his supplies. He was just waiting for all the family to clear out and to pick the ideal day and time for these killings. So, of course, he was happy and cheery. He didn't want anybody to think he was mad because that might give it away, what he was doing. So that's been the closing arguments in this case. The judge is currently instructing the jurors on the law, and that's basically just explaining the different elements the state must prove. Joel Guy Jr. is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, premeditated murder, in the killings of his parents. There are some additional counts of felony murder, which is just another way to argue the case. If you don't buy the premeditation, then buy that he killed these folks in the perpetuation of felonies, which would be theft and murder, and also 2 counts of abuse of corpse. The jury will get this case probably within the next 30 minutes, and then deliberations will begin. If Joel Guy Jr. is convicted on any of the murder counts, the judge will impose an automatic life sentence with the possibility of parole after 51 years, because the state is not seeking enhanced punishment. They're not seeking the death penalty, and they're not seeking life without parole. They have not explained that decision. But the judge will impose those automatic sentences should he be convicted in the murder counts, and then he will hold a separate hearing, probably a month or so down the road, to decide whether any of these convictions should be stacked to lengthen the amount of time he would serve in prison. So that's where we're at with this case. I will have a story for you later today that will just summarize these arguments and the proof. Of course, I will let you know on Twitter at Jamie Scoop is my handle immediately when we have this verdict. KnoxNews.com also is streaming my Twitter feed. So if you're following the live feed of the trial on KnoxNews.com, then you will be able to get the verdict in that way. And of course, we'll put up a story as soon as we get the verdict. So KnoxNews.com, we are working hard to bring this case to you, or I sure am. I'm tired. But thank you so much for following this case. It is important for people to see how justice works, to make sure that it works properly. And so that's why I'm here, so that you can see that your justice system is working in the way that it should. So thank you, and I will talk to you soon.